All right, so you wanted a deep dive into Hegel's philosophy of mind. Well, buckle up. We're going straight to the source excerpts from the text itself. We're talking Hegel here, so get ready. It might get a little philosophical.
That's one way to put it. Hegel's writing is notoriously dense.
Dense is right, but don't worry, we're here to help guide you through it. Now, Hegel was trying to understand, well, the entirety of reality, how our minds fit into it all. But before we jump in, why should anyone even try to understand this? What's the payoff?
Well, Hegel believed that by understanding the mind, we could unlock the secrets of the universe itself. It's all connected for him.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So Hegel talks about the concrete nature of mind, but he also says it's hard to observe because unlike rocks or trees, the different stages of the mind don't just exist separately. Can you help us wrap our heads around that?
Sure. Think about learning to ride a bike. You don't have those wobbly first attempts, the gradual balance, and finally effortless riding all happening at the same time. Each stage transforms into the next.
So to really get a seemingly simple thought or feeling, we might have to trace it back to its roots, right? See how it developed from earlier mental states? It's like those wobbly bike rides are still there in our smooth cycling today.
Precisely. And that's how Hegel looks at the mind. He breaks it down into three big parts: subjective mind, objective mind, and absolute mind. And just like learning to ride that bike, each section builds on the one before it.
Okay, so a roadmap for navigating Hegel. I like it. Are we ready to start with the subjective mind?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Hegel said this subjective mind is about how our individual minds work. He divides it further into the soul, consciousness, and psychology. Now, that soul part, what did Hegel even think a soul was?
Well, for Hegel, the soul wasn't some mystical, airy thing. It's the mind in its simplest form, how it first connects to the world through our bodies and senses.
Interesting. He actually calls the question of how the soul and body connect a real poser. He says even way back then, people considered it this huge mystery, impossible to figure out. But of course, Hegel tries to tackle it.
He does, and he explores this connection in some pretty interesting ways. He believed the soul was strongly affected by things like climate, the changing seasons, though he says that gets weaker as societies become more civilized.
That's fascinating. He also gets into the difference between sleep and waking. It says the soul is controlled by a genius, even mentions the sexual drive. A lot going on there.
Definitely. There's so much packed into this section.
Hold on, the genius thing really caught my attention. Hegel's basically saying another person can be like this genius for us, someone who sets our soul in vibration. But this isn't about intelligence, right? It's like encountering someone so captivating they influence you without even trying.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And it ties into another important idea for Hegel's self-feeling. This is where the soul wakes up to itself, recognizes itself as an individual. And that's a big step towards consciousness, the next stage.
Okay, so the soul becomes self-aware, and bam, we have consciousness.
That's the idea. Consciousness comes from that self-awareness. It's all about the relationship between the I and the world, the mind engaging with its surroundings, forming perceptions, making judgments, the beginning of subjectivity.
Interesting. Hegel takes a bit of a dig at Kant here, saying he only got as far as seeing the mind as consciousness. Like he's saying, come on, Kant, there's so much more.
He does. And Hegel takes us further. He walks us through these different levels of consciousness, starting with simple sensory awareness, moving through perception and understanding, and finally arriving at self-consciousness. It's this journey of the mind becoming more and more aware of its own power and freedom.
Okay, so we've journeyed from the soul waking up to the emergence of consciousness. Now, how does the mind go from subjective to objective? It's like escaping our own heads, right?
I like that way of thinking about it. But objective mind isn't about being cold and rational. It's more about how our minds, with their new freedom and self-awareness, actually shape the world. Think about things like laws, customs, institutions. These are all expressions of objective mind.
Oh, I see. So my choice to have coffee this morning, that's subjective mind. But the whole system of coffee production and trade, the whole network that got that coffee to my kitchen, that's objective mind. It's so much bigger than just me.
That's it. You got it. And Hegel breaks this objective mind down into three stages. We have abstract right, morality, and ethical life. Abstract right is the most basic, like having property rights.
So reading ahead a bit, Hegel actually says that war is one way a nation expresses its spirit. I got to say, that's a little intense.
It is a complicated idea for sure, but we need to understand what he means by spirit. He's talking about how a nation defines itself in relation to others, how it creates its own identity and independence, not so much endorsing war, but more acknowledging how it shaped nations historically.
Ah, okay. So we have abstract right, then morality, and then we get to ethical life. What's that all about?
Ethical life is where the mind really finds its fullest expression in concrete social institutions. We're talking about the family, civil society, and the state. These are the places where individual freedom finds its true meaning and purpose.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground, from the soul waking up to the complexities of ethical life. Quite a journey through subjective and objective mind. But hold on, we're not done yet. There's one more big section to tackle.
Wow.
Absolute mind. Is this like Hegel's grand theory of everything?
It's definitely grand, but maybe not a theory of everything. It's more like the highest level of spirit, where the mind gets past its limits and sees the infinite, you know?
Yeah.
This is where we find art, revealed religion, and philosophy. Big stuff.
Wow. So are we talking about the peak of what humans can achieve here? Like making amazing art or starting a religion is even more important than building a whole society.
That's where it gets really interesting. Hegel actually says art flourishes when a religion is declining. It's like we need art to fill the gap, to show those spiritual needs that traditional forms aren't satisfying anymore. A beautiful fix, but only temporary.
Art is a response to spiritual longing. I never
Right.
thought about it that way. Now, you mentioned revealed religion. What did Hegel mean by that? Did he believe in like a literal God talking to people?
Hegel's view of religion is pretty subtle. He thought the ultimate truth religion shows us is the self-knowledge of absolute spirit, unfolding through history. Less about specific rules, more about the big movement of spirit towards freedom, you see.
Okay, so it's about the overall story, not getting stuck on the details.
Yeah.
But how do we, as regular people, actually experience this absolute mind?
Yeah.
Is it something we can, like, go searching for?
Hegel says we experience it through those things we just talked about, art, religion, and philosophy. These are where the mind breaks free and grapples with the infinite.
Okay, starting to see the connections here.
Yeah.
But if philosophy is the peak of absolute mind, where does that leave everyone else? Are we stuck down here in objective mind, just building societies and, well, drinking coffee?
I don't think Hegel would say we're stuck. Remember, each stage builds on the one before, so even when we're doing everyday stuff, it's filled with the reason and freedom the mind developed through becoming self-aware.
So even my daily coffee ritual is, in a way, helping me understand the universe. I like the sound of that. Makes those early morning cravings seem way more profound.
Exactly. Every experience, every little thing we do contributes to how spirit unfolds in the world.
Interesting. Now, Hegel also talks about exoteric and esoteric understanding. What's that about? Is there some secret knowledge only a few people get? Like a philosophical VIP club?
That's where things get even more interesting. Hegel uses exoteric to describe the knowledge that's out in the open, what we learn from books, schools, conversations, that kind of thing. But then there's esoteric knowledge.
Okay, gotta ask, are we talking secret societies, hidden symbols? That's what pops into my head when I hear esoteric.
Not exactly. Hegel describes esoteric knowledge as this deeper, more intuitive understanding, something beyond words. The kind of knowing that comes from actually experiencing something, from feeling connected to the divine.
I think I get it. It's like you can read all about love, but actually being in love is a whole other level. Words just can't capture it.
Exactly. And for Hegel, philosophy at its highest level is all about reaching for this esoteric understanding, using the tools, concepts, logic, language as a way to jump into a more direct, intuitive grasp of reality.
So it's not just about understanding Hegel's ideas intellectually. It's about letting them change how we experience the world.
Yeah.
Opening us up to a whole new way of seeing things.
Exactly. It's about taking these philosophical ideas and actually applying them to our lives, letting them shape how we see ourselves, the world, and where we fit into it all.
All right, we made it. Through Hegel's philosophy of mind, from the soul waking up to the structured world of objective mind, all the way to the heights of absolute mind. What a journey.
It's been a fascinating exploration. Hegel's philosophy of mind is definitely a tough read, but it gives us such amazing insight into consciousness and our place in the cosmos. It's a lot to take in.
It is. You mentioned earlier we'd have a 10-point summary at the end. I think it would be super helpful for our listeners to have a clear recap of everything we've covered today. Could you walk us through those key takeaways?
Absolutely. Let's recap those 10 key points from our deep dive into Hegel's philosophy of mind. Number 1. Hegel's philosophy of mind explores how our minds fit into the grand scheme of reality.
That's a great starting point. What's next?
Number 2. The subjective mind includes the soul, consciousness, and psychology, going from basic sensations to self-awareness.
Right. So we start with the basics and build from there.
Number 3, even things that seem simple, like our senses, can reveal complex parts of the mind, according to Hegel. It's deeper than it looks.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, what else?
Number 4, the objective mind is how individual minds come together to create things like family, civil society, and the state. It's about how we impact the world around us.
Makes you think about how it all fits together, right?
Definitely. Number 5, even war, Hegel says, has a role in how a nation defines itself and shows its independence. A bit controversial, I know.
Yeah, that one definitely made me think. What's number 6?
Number 6, the absolute mind. This is the highest level of spirit, where the mind goes beyond its limits and understands the infinite.
Okay, getting into some really big ideas here.
We are. Number 7, art, revealed religion, and philosophy. These are all expressions of absolute mind, each giving us a glimpse of ultimate truth.
So many different ways to connect with the absolute.
Right. Number 8, Hegel says the need for art and religion shows that traditional forms are weakening. Interesting observation, isn't it?
It is. What about number 9?
Number 9, philosophy for Hegel is where the mind's journey ends, where art, religion, and thought all come together in perfect unity.
Wow, the grand finale. And finally, number 10.
Number 10, Hegel separates exoteric understanding, the stuff we learn out in the open, from esoteric understanding, which is deeper and beyond words.
So much to ponder there. It really is amazing when you think about it, going from the soul's first connection to the world all the way to the mind grasping infinity.
It shows how powerful Hegel's system is. He connects even the most abstract philosophical ideas back to our actual lives, our experiences.
And it's not just about understanding those ideas in our heads, is it? It's about letting them change how we actually live in the world.
Exactly. Seeing those Hegelian patterns everywhere in our lives, our relationships, how we make sense of things.
Looking back at those 10 takeaways, is there one that really stands out to you? Something you think our listeners should really ponder?
You know, I always find the one about art flourishing when religion declines fascinating. It's like humans need to find meaning to express the spiritual, even when old ways aren't working. Makes you think about what role art plays for us, doesn't it? What's it filling in? What's it trying to say?
That's a great point. And it ties back to that esoteric understanding, right? Maybe art helps us access those truths that are beyond words.
Exactly. Art can be that bridge to a deeper understanding, those flashes of the absolute that Hegel talks about.
Wow. So much to think about. We've explored the depths of the subjective mind, how objective mind works, and even climbed to the heights of absolute mind. What a journey through Hegel's philosophy.
It has been a wild ride. I'm glad we could navigate it together, and hopefully our listeners found it both challenging and rewarding.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Hegel's philosophy of mind, I want to leave everyone with one last question. Hegel describes philosophy as the esoteric study of the divine. Do you think there's a kind of understanding that goes beyond words, a realm of knowing that transcends language and logic? And if so, how do we find it?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can we truly grasp the infinite, the divine, with words alone? Or is there a deeper knowing that goes beyond language? Maybe, as Hegel suggests, philosophy is the path to that understanding, leading us to a direct experience of the absolute, something to think about.
It certainly is. And on that note, it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Hegel's philosophy of mind. It's been challenging, but hopefully this is just the beginning of a lifelong exploration for our listeners. Thanks for joining us.